Hey everybody, welcome to Church History for Chumps. My name is John Simon. I'm here with my two peas in a pod. Thomas Duell, Taylor, what's your last name, Taylor? Taylor Duell.
Taylor Simon. You're my long lost brother.
Oh, I thought you were gonna go with the "we're married" thing, but that's better. That's better.
Oh,
hey guys,
you're depraved beyond all measure.
Relax, bro. Take it easy.
Repent,
guys. I had a really cool conversation with this rando dude on Instagram on the Church History for Chumps account, and he told me, he's like, "Hey, I love the pod." First off, he said he's from Singapore, so shout out Singapore.
Out Singapore.
Singapore. Malta's out for me.
What? No.
Yeah, dude. No, they dropped. We're not ranking for them anymore. We've got nothing for Malta.
They're not out for you. They're out for us.
We weirded them out with all of our Malta talk.
Yeah, Malta's dead.
Right.
But Singapore is on the up and freaking up, dude. So, Singapore, we love you guys.
Are you sure it's not just whoever was using their VPN to get into Malta is now going to...
know. But what I do know is that there is a very pleasant young man from Singapore who loves our show. And he said, and I quote, "I got some of my friends hooked on this, but one of them hates the banter." And I said, "What's his name?"
Guess what we're going to banter about today?
It's going to be you, big dog. I love this dude's response because he was like low-key doxing, though. So that's how I know he's probably like, I don't know. That sounds like something a young person would say. It made me feel very old. But his name's Ewan or Ewan. It's like what is
Ewan.
It? Yeah, Ewan. What's Obi-Wan Kenobi? Is that
Ewan
his name?
McGregor.
Yeah. It's like him. And it's this dude's brother. So shout out to Ewan. We'll keep the banter really good today.
No, it's not whether it's good or bad. I think he just hates it.
So should we just stop for the sake of Ewan?
I used to listen to a podcast that they'd put in the show notes exactly where the banter stopped so that you could skip it right to the meat.
Should we do that today for Ewan?
Just this one time.
Skip to 47:56.
Skip to 59:64. Oh man, how was your Lord's Day, fellas? How did the Lord speak to your hearts?
It was great, man. We had
Well, you kind of spoke to yourself, right, Thomas? Because you were the one leading, huh?
I wasn't preaching today. Actually, we had the presiding minister in our denomination, Pastor Yuri Brito, was with us. He preached Psalm 98. It was very encouraging.
Nice.
Yeah.
Super cool. What about you, Tay-Trey?
Well, I feel very congregational today.
Oh yeah, you sent us that screenshot from
our pastor's main point. Our pastor's main point this morning was the congregation has the authority to affirm or reject the work of the elders.
You know, when I thought about that, I hated it when I read it at first. And then when I really thought about it, and I'm just reading my own personal experiences into this, but like there is something like kind of comforting about the thought that a congregation full of like good, wholesome Christians could just kind of swoop in and be like, "Hey, you elders, God bless you, but you're a little on the wrong side here. We're just gonna nudge you. We're just gonna give you a little nudge." But
that's actually a presupposition in Presbyterianism, but we just work it out a little bit different. I'm assuming that whoever was teaching that class had all sorts of qualifications for that statement.
What a mean thing to say, Thomas.
What?
So,
no.
Look, congregationalism, you have to gatekeep membership in congregationalism.
Right.
So, like, congregationalism done right has church discipline. Church membership is taken seriously because, Miss Patsy should and does have the right to raise a question in a business meeting. Now, granted, if it's an accusation against an elder, you need to have 2 or more witnesses, right? So, yeah. And then we had a church business meeting tonight. We ate fried chicken. It was basically the most Baptist
That was the business, wasn't it? They were like, "We got some business to attend to. There is some fried chicken that needs to be consumed."
I need a second for this motion.
Yeah, we unfortunately have to weigh on this pressing matter, original or extra crispy.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
Man.
We had it way on this matter.
That's good. That's good. All right. For the sake of our boy, I think we jump in. How do you guys feel? Does that sound all right?
Yep.
Tell me
All right.
about Ambrose.
This is
Taylor, you just got kind of quiet. Bump your mic up.
And I have this great story that I love. I actually hate telling this story, but I'm gonna tell it anyways. So Ambrose was the name is the name of a church in the city I live in. And I have a very challenging memory going connected to the name Ambrose. So when I was in high school, I fell in love with this Catholic girl. Gosh, I wish I could have just spoken to young John and been like, dude, it's not worth it. But I fell in love with this Catholic girl, and we kind of like flirted around each other. You know, I had a crush on her. She had a crush on me. She was kind of waiting for me to make the move. You know, like a good trad girl. Like she's just kind of waiting for the guy to, like, I don't know, call up her dad or something. Anyways, I was too nervous to make the right move, and so some other dude asked her out. And they started dating, and I was devastated. So her friend gets kind of really into the whole Catholic thing, and she's going to get baptized at this girl's parish, which is St. Ambrose in town. And so I'm thinking, all right, I'm out. She's dating this other guy. I just totally dropped the ball. I'm going to get back in here, though, because I'm going to go to this best friend's baptism, and I'm going to show all kinds of support. And she's going to be like, look at this handsome, religious, sophisticated man supporting my friend's baptism. And I went, assuming that her boyfriend was not going to be there. He was there, and he brought a bunch of their friends. So now it's a bunch of people that I don't know, and I'm like the weird outlier. After the baptism, when everyone's mingling, I'm super awkward. My nose starts to bleed. I run to the bathroom to like clean myself up. And when I come out, all of them have left. And I'm just like sitting there like, oh, this is a tough time. So whenever I think of St. Ambrose, the first thing that I think of is just the absolute embarrassment of being 17 and just having a broken heart over some pretty Catholic girl. My
you
wife's
had
staring at
the
me now.
nosebleed like an anime.
But I didn't level up. I leveled down. It's like I went from Super Saiyan to like a normal guy. It was terrible.
No, they have the nosebleed when they're attracted to somebody.
Okay, it wasn't that.
Also, who shows up to a baptism uninvited?
No, they invited me. I was invited. I wasn't stalking a baptism.
You left that part out of the story.
I think it was implied.
Nope, was not.
All right, whatever. Well, anyways, freaking St. Ambrose. Now I'm trying to do a bunch of reading so I can just replace the trauma that I've experienced. So here's my spiel. Let's talk about it.
I've taken some counseling classes.
Oh, trust me, bro. I'm taking enough counseling right now. All right. When you look at the life of Ambrose of Milan, there's a term that comes to mind. A term that implies an unflinching ability to win over the hearts of the masses. One whose words can stir the spirits of a crowd just as it can comfort the mind of an individual. That term is the people's champion. Ambrose was the people's champion. As surely as Justin Martyr was a philosopher, as surely as Antony was a mystic, as surely as Augustine was a theologian, Ambrose was something altogether different. He was a pastor, a shepherd of the flock who spoke with strength and conviction as easily as he spoke with gentleness and compassion. He would pastor the weak and the uninfluential. He would pastor the emperors themselves. He was not a one-dimensional man. No, as we'll discover, he was a man of both incredible things that we would all stand behind and go, yeah, go Ambrose. And then there's some other things that we might be scratching our heads over, but that's okay. This is Ambrose of Milan. And you know what? He's bigger than that stupid church that I embarrassed myself in back in 2009. Gosh dang it. So let's talk about him.
Let's do it.
Ambrose was born in either the year 339 or 340, so this kind of follows our whole early church gets the worm spiel, but we've also been spending quite a bit of time in the 3rd century, 4th century, so for all the nerds keeping track at home, this is going to be a little bit after Constantine, who we've been talking about recently, who's going to kind of shake things up. Suddenly, we're not going to have Rome as this quasi-pagan melting pot of all these religious places. It still is, but now we've got this groundbreaking thing that happens, which is the very first emperor professes to be a Christian. And so we're going to see the landscape of Rome completely start to shift in some good ways and some, I think, difficult ways. But either way, Ambrose is going to be born in 339 or 340, not really sure, to a home of significant political influence. His father, whose name is also Ambrose, is the governor in Roman Gaul, which I think is like northern France today, specifically in the province of Trier, which was the headquarters for the Western Caesar. Now, governors were an interesting kind of position in this time because when we think of governors, we tend to think of them, especially American dudes, we tend to think of it as, the governor of a state. But because the political makeup of Rome was very different than what it would be in the United States, governors had a lot of roles. Like they were kind of the eyes and ears of the emperor. They oversaw city councils. They kept tabs on how infrastructure was going. They wanted to make sure the roads were working, that trade routes were established. They had power, limited power, but still power over the military. They acted as judges over civil and criminal cases, maintained law and order, made sure taxes were coming in. So they were basically like small-time emperors. Like they handled things that our modern day judges would do and prosecutors would do. Like they had a lot of things kind of going on. So Ambrose's father is going to die fairly young, but his mother is going to see to it that all of her children receive a great education and continue the legacy of the family into politics. And Ambrose is going to really jump into his studies. He takes up an early interest in Greek, which was a really big deal because he is in the West, and Western Romans around this time are kind of settling into Latin exclusively, just as Eastern Romans are settling into Greek. So him being interested in Greek is going to help us out a lot when he gets into studying the patristics and theology. He's going to study the classics. He's going to learn the art of rhetoric. He's going to read Homer and Plato and, all the classic dudes. And soon he will start up his political career serving at a political post in Rome. But before long, he would be appointed by the Emperor Valentinian I to governor of Milan, which was one of the most significant positions in the Western world because about 30 years prior, Milan, rather than Rome, was made the political center of the Western Empire. This was a very big deal. This was like a huge position to get, and it was a testament to the fact that Ambrose was a smart, educated dude who had strong character, and probably a little bit more than that, he was a nepo baby. He had the backing of a father who had a great reputation, and he's got a family full of upstanding citizens. Tom, you're gonna say something?
I was gonna say God loves nepo babies too.
Yeah, he sure does, man. I mean, the Bible's full of them, right? Like that's the whole system of patriarchs.
Maybe God only loves nepo babies.
I mean, biggest guy in the Bible, God's son.
Oh my gosh.
Coincidence?
We're all nepo babies if you
That's
really
right.
think
We're
about
all
it.
God's sons.
In Christ, we're all nepo babies.
That's pretty
That's
sick.
my new sermon at the mega church.
That's good. All right. So yeah, he gets this great new position. This was a very big deal and really fits the mold of what Ambrose is trying to do with his political career. Now, you must be wondering at this time, is Ambrose a Christian? And he is, but he's not fully. He was raised a Christian, but we see, especially in the 4th century, this really interesting trend and we kind of saw it in Augustine's story, and we'll see it when we get to the end of Constantine's story, but because I'm not even sure if it's because like the theology of baptism isn't super fleshed out yet, but there's a common thing, especially among elites, that Christians just don't like getting baptized right away. And I'm sure, Tommy, it has something to do with the extended catechesis process, but there's literally like a a running theme where Christians will intentionally kind of push back their baptism because they believe that baptism was the washing away of sins, and they don't want to get baptized too early and like risk having more sins to deal with at death. And so Ambrose is a catechumen, and even though the fact that he's in his like early 30s at this time, he has not gotten baptized yet, which is going to come up pretty shortly.
I mean, they basically, at that point in church history, requiring a seminary education to be baptized.
Which this dude has. He is like a very smart, well-read dude. It's not for lack of trying that he's not baptized. Or no.
So you're saying he was
lack of trying.
He was raised in a Christian family,
yep.
right?
Yeah.
Oh wow, but he wasn't. That's so odd. He wasn't baptized as a baby, right, Tommy?
Moving along. I'm gonna skip right over that little mine. All right. So this incredible event is going to happen where, unknown to Ambrose at this time, Milan was something of a theological powder keg, which is really interesting. About 20 years prior, the Emperor Constantius, who was a notorious Arian advocate, appoints this dude named Auxentius, which if it wasn't for the fact that he was an Arian, would be a baller freaking name, because Auxentius is a cool name. But Auxentius is an Arian who serves as Bishop of Milan for quite a while and, causes all this tension. Like we've said, this is after the Council of Nicaea, which affirmed that Arianism is a heresy, but also just affirmed all the good things about Christology of his divine and human natures that really does refute Arianism. So yeah, you've got Auxentius, but what's going to happen is 2 years after Ambrose becomes governor of Milan, Auxentius dies. And so now there's this power vacuum that suddenly explodes in Milan, and there's going to be this like kind of battle between the Nicene Christians and the Arian Christians. And so there's going to be this event. I think it was actually the election of the new bishop where, you've got, I just imagine like this alleyway where you've got like Arian Christians on one side and they're all wearing blue, and Nicene Christians on the other side and they're all wearing red, and they're just throwing tomatoes at each other. And Ambrose shows up. And Ambrose, just like being the sweet diplomatic dude that he is, he just like sets up a little soapbox and he's like, my friends. And he just gives this wonderful impassioned speech about like diplomacy and Christian charity towards one another, and hey, what did Christ not call us to love even our enemy as ourselves, and shall we rip the church asunder? None of these things he actually said. We don't know what he said, but just improvise. He's just like, should we rip the church asunder on behalf of whatever, and the people are so moved that there's this like silence that just echoes when he's done speaking. And literally the story goes that a child just said out loud, Ambrose for bishop. And then somebody else was like, yeah, Ambrose for bishop. And they start chanting, Ambrose. And this is literally the story. Like, I wish I was exaggerating. The story is that they start chanting his name. And Ambrose is like, I do not want to freaking be bishop. Like, I am killing it in my career right now. I do not want to be a freaking like church man. I'm not even baptized yet. I do not want to do this. But the people are like, this guy we like him a lot. And so there's other kind of processes that have to go down for this to be affirmed. Word gets out to the other bishops in the process, and they're like, Ambrose? That's a great idea. And so they affirm it, and then word gets to the emperor, and Ambrose is like, oh, dude, the emperor appointed me as governor. There's no way he's going to want me to be bishop. Like, that would be a loss for him. And the emperor is like, oh my gosh, I am so touched that one of my governors would be willing to be a bishop of Milan. I think this is a great idea. And Ambrose is so turned off. He literally, like, there's a statue that I saw of him on a horse, and it's him, like, fleeing away from Milan. Like, it's his whole Jonah arc of, like, I do not want to do this. And he hides out in a friend's house until, like,
this is like a
him.
repeated thing in the ancient world. Somebody, we want you in this status, and they say, "Oh, not I could never." And then the people demand your servitude, and oh, not I must flee to exile.
Well, dude, it's like if you're a young guy who's ever been like really pressured by your elders, or in Taylor's case, your congregation, to step up in responsibility. It's been happening for hundreds of years, essentially. If you're just a young whippersnapper full of gusto and the Holy Spirit, and people are just like, maybe you should quit your job and work for the church.
There's a call on your life, son. There is
got
a
an
call to
anointing,
that
my
pulpit.
boy. You got an anointing.
I think it's interesting to note that this is within a generation after Constantine had started giving a lot more like civil responsibility to the bishops in Rome. Because I think to us it sounds kind of odd that we would have somebody who's like basically a politician. Like if you think of like the equivalent of that for us, or just like, oh, we need a new senior pastor at this big church in Phoenix. Like John McCain's up for the job, like that would just be like so weird. But because of, I don't know exactly what the situation in Milan was, but I would assume that a lot of the elements of the job of bishop would kind of complement the work that he was doing as governor.
Yeah, I mean, he was and what I think we'll get into in a sec is that what makes him a good politician, honestly, is going to make him a pretty darn good bishop too, which is not surprising to everybody except for Ambrose, essentially. But
leadership is leadership.
Exactly. Yeah, a good leader is a good leader. So yeah,
doesn't exactly make you qualified for church office alone, just being a good leader. But
exactly,
we're going to find out that Ambrose was qualified.
The Venn diagram's not quite just one circle, but there's definitely some shared traits. But yeah, this was kind of a weird thing. Like I said, dude had not been baptized. He wasn't a priest also, which, probably wouldn't surprise you that most people don't just take the fast pass from catechumen to bishop. Usually there's and I think one of the things that Ambrose was opposed to was there was literally an edict, or at least some kind of ruling within the church that said that new converts aren't supposed to be priests, which is really just a biblical reading because when we look at, I think it's one of the Timothys, it says that new believers should not be pastors. It should not be elders.
Well, we covered that in Taylor's episode when we were talking about the Council of Nicaea and the canons that came out of that. That was one of the canons that they had, was that you can't do that.
Yeah. So there were a lot of rules kind of being broken here. And like I said, Ambrose is literally going to hide out in, he's going to run away from Milan and hang out with a friend at his house until his friend finds out that the emperor basically ratified his position. And he was like, dude, I'm not going to get raided by the feds just so that you can hang out in my basement, bro. And so then Ambrose is like, all right, fine. You guys freaking suck. And December 7th, 374, Ambrose is ordained as Bishop of Milan. Unsurprising to everyone except for him, Ambrose is a wonderful bishop. He is charitable and kind. He is open to parishioners far and wide, and he is up to the task of combating the widespread problem that was Arianism. One thing that's really interesting. Oh yeah, go for it, dude.
So obviously there's this tension going on in Milan between the Arian Christians, or if you want to call them that, and the Arian sympathizers and the Nicene Christians. Mm-hmm. Why did Ambrose cut through that divide? Did the Arians support him being bishop?
Oh, that's a good question. I almost wonder if the fact that he wasn't... the fact that he wasn't baptized, it's almost like they saw him as a free agent. Like, I think that I'm sure there were Arian Christians, and I'm sorry, there were Arians and there were Nicene Christians who all wanted their side to be advocated for, but I also think they just in general respected the fact that Ambrose was a diplomatic dude who had a good air about him, who knew how to lead well. So I think the Arians were probably just like you said, just kind of compelled by the fact that he was a good leader, and he didn't have a side yet. Which I think was the big thing. So I think they both kind of saw like, oh, this dude might, he could be swayed, I suppose.
Something to consider is that when we read about these guys, this is essentially history being written by the victors.
Of course. Yeah.
Like, I have not found any nice things about Arians written. And I'm like, what? Because at first I was like you get charged up in your research. You're like, yeah, those dirty Arians and all their crimes with their heresy. And you're like, yeah, look at the good Christ-believing people. I don't know, man. I just think it just happened to be that. I'm not saying Ambrose was a bad guy.
It's all gonna be a mix. And one of the things that, I mean, again, as postmodern readers, which all three of us are, even if we try not to be, there's always going to be that sense of, how do we know this is legit? Because we know who wrote the history books. And I think if we don't push on that, then we just gobble up propaganda. But if we do, then we want to find that nice middle ground.
The propaganda tastes real good, though.
Oh, like, it's delicious.
The story of the child that breaks the silence. Ambrose for bishop. Like,
right.
I don't think that didn't happen.
Hey, I don't know. We also again, we believe in a God who does miracles. We believe in fantastical things that occur because they're in our scriptures. And who are we to say that these fantastical events don't extend into church history as well?
I mean, that's what makes history too. Is amazing things happen and it shifts the course of it.
Yeah. I do love just slathering a little bit of doubt. Just to be balanced, but I'm also like, the fun part about church history is reading stuff that sounds kind of ridiculous and being like, do I really buy this? And then eventually you're like, actually, yeah, for the most part I do. So I don't know. Take it with a grain of salt. So one of the interesting things about the era that Ambrose inherits is that, again, Diocletian, when he came through and established the Tetrarchy, he's going to separate the empire into the eastern and western regions. And so, like we kind of hinted at earlier, that's going to further these cultural divides that exist between the East and West, which of course is going to continue to kind of snowball until eventually we see that Eastern and Western churches look very different, and then we lead to the Great Schism in 700 years from now. But what was cool about Ambrose is because the dude had such an interest in Greek when he was a student, that was really helpful being a Western Christian who read Eastern things, because he
spoke their language. Literally. He spoke the language, and he's going to be discipled by a priest named Simplicianus, which is just a bummer that he's got four lame letters at the end of his name. Simplicianus. Okay, I think it was. I don't know, man. But
it's always funny when you see these names and you're like, I can kind of see why that one didn't, stick around.
Didn't get a lot of gravity to it. But he's going to be discipled by this dude, and he's going to be able to read, like, in the original Greek, authors like Athanasius and Origen and the Cappadocian Fathers in their native Greek. And so that would actually allow him to be a kind of conduit to Eastern wisdom as a Latin church father, which is pretty dope. One thing that really speaks to just the coolness of his pastoral heart, but also just him being a good bishop, was he institutes like an open door policy where he's going to have like office hours, and he essentially is going to say anyone within my jurisdiction can just come into my office and can ask me questions and can ask me about the Bible or about life. He had two rules, which I thought were really funny. He didn't do matchmaking, so that probably kept the young Christians from bothering him, specifically the dudes. And he wouldn't do like letters of recommendation for people seeking like political office.
Man.
So he was like, if you guys
There's
can
nothing
afford
new under the sun, man.
yeah, I'm telling you, dude. That was so good. And, you know, one of these days, a scruffy North African dude by the name of Augustine is going to shuffle into his office, curious to learn from Ambrose, not because he gave a rip about theology, but because he knew that Ambrose was an incredible speaker. And that's going to start this, historical relationship that would end with Augustine being baptized personally by Ambrose. And Augustine, of course, will become the most significant theologian since Paul at this point.
You gotta love when the CH4C cinematic universe overlap
I love
occur.
it, man. It's like those.
There's a lot
those,
of it.
Yeah, it's like those memes where it's like the celebrity guest appearance in like the old sitcoms.
Yeah,
where they turn
everybody
around
cheers and they kind of
Woo!
like,
yeah, that's what I feel like we're doing. It's just this beautiful thing. All right, so now things are gonna get messy. Valentinian I, who is the emperor who appointed Ambrose as the governor of Milan and is going to ratify him as the bishop of Milan. He's going to die in battle. And his son, Gratian, is going to become the new emperor, but the army is not going to accept it. The army, is going to insist on Valentinian II, who I think was like 8 months old at the time, to be the true heir to the throne, which was really just this puppet leadership thing because Valentinian
whenever the
II
army wants an 8-month-old to be the boss, you know what's going down.
This baby is our king.
This infant shall be our lord. And so Valentinian II, his mother, who is not the mother of Gratian, is Justina. And Justina becomes this like arch villain of the story because she is this like raging Arian. And she's going to fight to get Arian's influence back into the church. And so there's going to be all this conflict and kind of all this negativity that happens. And I'm going to skip over a lot of history here because honestly it gets kind of murky and I'm just not that smart. I didn't follow it super well as I was reading it, to be completely honest. Hey,
you are smart. You are smart. Don't talk about my friend John that way.
Thank you, Taylor. I really needed that. But what's going to happen is Gratian is going to get killed. And there's going to be this kind of overthrow where Justina and Ambrose have to lean on each other. And much like you said, Tommy, there is going to be this kind of leaning on Ambrose as a bishop to assist the civic kind of stability. He is going to definitely step into some political roles here. But the big conflict that's going to happen is that Justina is going to get some political influence and she's going to basically start pressuring Ambrose to dedicate a basilica in Milan to the Arians to worship at. And he's like, that's not going to freaking happen. And the big high point of this is when there's essentially going to be like a siege where they're going to be where Arians are going to send troops to this basilica, and Ambrose and hundreds of Christians, which actually included Monica, the mother of Augustine, are going to hide out in this church. And while the troops are just outside like, you better come out here, you Nicene Christians, or we're going to blow your house down, Ambrose is just like, hey guys, I'm gonna teach you guys some songs. And so they just sang hymns for like a week as the troops like besieged the basilica. And this was beautiful for a couple reasons. One, because I don't know, I love the stories of Christians singing songs in the midst of danger. But it's also really cool because the style that Ambrose taught them in was the call and response style of worship that became popularized in Catholic churches for hundreds and hundreds of years and can still be seen in some liturgies in Catholic churches today. So Yeah, just the fact that Ambrose kept a cool head, kept his convictions very, very firm, and yeah, and was
Do you
able to innovate on top of that.
do you think so? The worship leader. If you don't know, I'm a worship leader, whatever you want to call
Oh,
that, song leader, whatever. To all
you're
our
like a
viewers, listeners,
creative ambassador.
I like to consider myself the creative architect at 11th Street Baptist Church. No, I'm just
Okay.
kidding. But anyway, so that's my world. And in Black church, the worship is very much like call and response. And I wonder if that tradition goes all the way back. Because that was something that I respect about that tradition. Like the
Yeah.
worship leader sings something, and then the choir behind them and the congregation is like expected to join in.
I got
Yeah.
some Dottie Peoples going in my brain right now. I can hear it.
Yeah, dude, it wouldn't surprise me because like call and response. If you look at the call and response in like a Catholic church and then the call and response of like a Black Baptist church, they're different, but you can also see where the influence could overlap a little bit because it really does just reinforce this idea that the people are involved in worship and it's not just something you're observing. So
Right.
yeah, no, I could totally see that. There's a great quote that Ambrose has where somebody said, "Ambrose, if you had stepped out of that church, I would have cut your head off." And Ambrose responded, "May God permit it. Then I shall suffer as a bishop should, and you will act according to your kind." So he's just like, "Yeah, do it, you freaking animal." That's really what he was saying. Yeah, just do it. There was another interesting scenario happening where parts of the Western Empire were constantly in battle with different tribes of barbarians. And when barbarians were successful, they were capturing Roman citizens and holding them for ransom. And Ambrose was contributing to paying off these barbarians to get these citizens freed. And there was a controversy where when the church ran out of money, Ambrose gave away like golden chalices and basically beautiful parts of the church to be melted down and sold. And people were very critical of this. And Tommy, you'll like this because he basically references the story of Lawrence the Deacon, where he said, "Are not the true treasures of the church the poor and the needy, not the golden vessels themselves?"
Nice.
And I think his quote was, "Should we not give value to the living vessel rather than the golden one?" Which I thought was super dope.
Wow.
And then one of the books I read was like, "And the Arians hated that," but I'm like, did they?
Of course they did,
really
dude.
hate that? Arians were like, so things will come out to a close a little bit when Emperor Theodosius is going to become once again the primary emperor of Rome. He's going to kind of bridge the gap between this Eastern-Western divide, and he's going to become the main emperor. And they're going to have a really interesting relationship because much like Gratian, who was Valentinian's son, Ambrose is going to kind of become this spiritual father figure to Theodosius. And he's going to, they're going to meet together. He's going to kind of disciple him and mentor him a little bit. And there are a few interactions that they'll have. Theodosius also very, very significant in the grand scheme of Romans' growing Christianization, because I believe it's in 380 AD that he's going to pass the Edict of Thessalonica, which would make Christianity the state religion of Rome and will condemn heresies, especially Arianism. So Arianism is certainly going to exist beyond this, but this will definitely be a big step that the empire takes away from Arianism.
So that's the beginning of the decline of Arianism.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So Theodosius, he actually puts the nail in the coffin.
Okay. Yeah.
He finished what Athanasius started.
So there's two really interesting stories that I want to get into, and this is probably one of Ambrose's lasting legacies, because Ambrose very, very much believes, which I don't think is problematic at all, the idea that the highest authority, he's got this quote that people either really love or really hate, which is the emperor is in the church, not above it. So that's going to come out in two stories, which are going to play out very differently. The first is the riots of Callinicum. And so what's going to happen, and this is maybe going to sit a little more uncomfortably on our modern convictions, but essentially there's going to be a mob in the Roman town of Callinicum, possibly led by the town's own bishop, and they're going to lead a riot against the Jews that lived there. And in the midst of that riot, they're going to burn the synagogue down. Now, Theodosius, who is a professing Christian, but does not, definitely prides himself in not favoring one side over another, is going to say, all right, the Christians who are involved need to be punished, and they should pay out of their own pockets to restore the destroyed synagogue. And Ambrose is like, no. And so Ambrose writes a letter to Theodosius and basically vehemently disagrees and says that for a bishop to be responsible for building a synagogue was to become a betrayer of his own faith, and argued that the Christians owed the Jews of that town nothing. And so Theodosius was convinced and repealed his edict, bringing no consequences nor restitution to the matter. And yeah, I'll be honest, not a huge fan of that.
Yikers!
And on a historical level, whether we're fans or not fans of that, this is going to contribute to a growing pattern that can be seen in many influential Christian figures in this time, which is a rhetoric of pretty hostile anti-Semitic rhetoric that will definitely contribute to the acts of anti-Semitic treatment from Christians, especially once Christians have all of the political and cultural influence that's going to lead well into European history for a really, really long time.
He paved the way for Martin Luther.
Yeah, well, worse than that, man. Martin Luther was anti-Semitic when his influence was waning. There are lots of leaders who are going to be anti-Semitic at the prime of their career, and that's going to be it's going to be a little problematic. Another story about Theodosius and Ambrose that I think leaves a little bit better taste in our mouths is that there's going to be another riot that happens in the town of Thessalonica, which I'm pretty sure is the one that the Bible talks about. There's going to be apparently this huge riot that happens there where there's like a massacre, and I think the governor or one of the, judicial figures in that town are killed, and Theodosius loses his cool, and he basically orders a ton of troops to go to that town, orders like a massacre to take place, and 7,000 people are killed in that town. And again, Ambrose writes a very freaking angry letter to Theodosius, and he basically says, dude, if you come to my town, he basically says, like, it's on site, dude. But not like, he's not going to kill him. He's basically like, if you come to my town and you step into my church, I will not give you communion. Like, I will stop the service, like mid-service, to rebuke you. I don't care if you're the emperor. And he says, like, you need to repent. You need to perform public penance for what you did. This was completely unacceptable. And there's a lot of stories that kind of talk through what Theodosius did, but all of them seem to point to the fact that he did take the bishop's words very much to heart, and that one of the things he did, which I think was maybe the most compelling of the options, was that he stood outside of a church dressed in the clothes of a beggar, and he had to beg for the people who walked by to intercede for him, basically saying, like, pray for me because I'm a wicked sinner for what I've done, as a way of showing penance. Historical, maybe. I think so. I think there's enough to like affirm that. And again, a lot of people believe that of the early emperors, Theodosius really was a committed Christian, Nicene Christian even. But this really affirms that Ambrose really did believe if there's going to be God-fearing happening in the minds and hearts of emperors, they need to submit to the authority of the church. And he very much believed in that, and sometimes I think there was great value to it, and sometimes I think it was a bit on the misguided side, but that's up for discussion. But anyways, after serving as a bishop in Milan for several decades, becoming a strong advocate for Nicene Christianity and discipling some of the most powerful and influential figures of this generation, Ambrose would die on Easter Sunday, April 4th, 397.
Of
and that
course
is our
he
boy,
did.
Ambrose. Yeah, he died on Easter.
Of course he did. I just look, man. I believe.
Skeptic, bro.
I don't mean to be a
my
skeptic.
gosh.
I like this. It tastes good, right?
It tastes delicious, bro.
Of course he did. And of course Theodosius stood outside in rags, ringing the shame bell. Ding, ding, ding. I
Just
mean,
lashing
look, dude.
himself. Yeah.
Yeah. Could you imagine, though, the modern equivalent if, like, I don't know. I mean, John MacArthur, I think, sent Biden enough letters, right? Imagine if Biden
dude,
was like,
dude,
yes, I
that's what I
moved to
was thinking.
repentance.
Like, and I literally thought about this. Like, if the Secretary of State went to your church and you knew that they just like bombed some village and killed like 800 civilians in, Yemen somewhere, and then this person walks up to you at the Lord's table with her hands outstretched for the Eucharist, I don't know if I'm like, here you go. Like, there is something to like it. I think that, again, it feels uncomfortable for my American minds to think that pastors and clergy would have that much influence. But really, the way that it's meant to be is not that the pastor has influence. It's that they are able to hold these magistrates accountable to God himself, not to themselves.
Yeah, I think this actually works in all church systems that we could advocate for. Like, I'm thinking from congregationalism. So ideally, President so-and-so is a member of a church. What does that mean?
Right.
Well, it means he's a member in good standing, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
that's if that's something that's important to the people, that's like another element of accountability, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes, like, he now is accountable to his elders for his moral actions before God.
Right.
And so,
because when you look at it, it's like if the Secretary of State goes to my church, I can't throw her in jail for what she does.
No.
Like, I can't, but I can hold her accountable within the scope of my own authority, which literally might just be, I can't give her communion.
Yeah,
or,
fencing the table. Yeah.
Yeah, or we say, like, you're under church discipline because you're clearly doing, like, there is clear evidence that you're doing something grossly unethical and you have no sign of repentance. So I can say, you're no longer welcome at our church, unfortunately. That's not the same as locking someone in a cage. That just means,
Correct.
Yeah, but
And
I
it
think
sounds
that's
like
totally valid.
It sounds like for Theodosius that Ambrose, who's somebody he respects, telling him, if you came here, you don't get communion, and you're being publicly rebuked. Like, that sounds like that might have been enough for him to go, like,
Yes,
I did.
and I think
Nobody
that's
likes
exactly
getting
what it
called
was.
out on their sin, right?
No,
we all
no.
like we do something sinful, and we're like, I was justified because of blah blah blah, and then Pastor so and so has to come in and say, actually,
Yeah. And I think
ideally,
exactly it's what you said. Like, he had so much respect for the Bishop of Milan that he was like, dude, like, if he's calling me out, he's probably right, and I want to kind of get myself in order here. So yeah, makes total sense. Did we lose Tommy, dude?
We lost him. Our wayward Presbyterian.
All right.
I don't know what to think about that synagogue. No leaders are perfect, but gosh,
certainly not. Yeah, but it was interesting because I only read like a very brief kind of footnote about it at first, And so I like most of the books I read that offered like biography on Ambrose really skipped over that story. And so when I poked around and found it, I was just like, oh, this is rough. So I mean, but I also think it's really important that when you present history, you don't whitewash it because, you know, that's not how Christianity works. It's not how the Bible works. The Bible doesn't gloss over people's flaws. The Bible will be like, yeah, this one time he counted people and he wasn't supposed to, so God cut off his arms. Like the Bible will take like your smallest sin and just make it look enormous. So I'm like, no, we don't gloss over stuff here.
You actually just read through Genesis, and it's just like a highlight reel of what not to do.
Yeah, this guy sneezed while he was facing the Ark of the Covenant, and God sawed him in half. Like
straight to jail.
Straight to jail. Oh man, yeah, and
good.
yeah. That's that.
I'm a fan of this Ambrose fella. I am.
Yeah, dude, me too. I am too.
I like camping where we are right now.
Him.
You know, camping where we are right now in church history is really interesting. I feel kind of bad that we already did Augustine, or because like we're like leading up to this almost now. Maybe we can revisit Augustine.
Maybe we can. I mean, there's still a handful of other good figures that we can talk about, but I should have said Ambrose is one of the 4 Latin doctors of the Catholic Church, which I think includes it's him, Augustine, Gregory the Great, and Jerome, I believe. I think Jerome is the one who wrote the Latin Vulgate. But yeah, so he's a head honcho for sure. He's a solid guy. But I like the fact that one of Ambrose's leading traits was just that he was a good leader who loved people well. He discipled intentionally, and he seemed to not really vibe with the Jews. I that's not what I liked about him. It just stood out. Yeah. Why are Christians on Twitter suddenly really anti-Semitic, Taylor? Have you figured that out?
Okay, so first off, I would say there's 3 camps.
Okay.
There's the extreme Israel could do no wrong no matter what.
Sure.
They're God's chosen people. And one time, I shouldn't say this because it was in a small Bible study, but it was really funny. Somebody said that, and my pastor looked at them and said, I don't know. They sort of had a chance and rejected Jesus. And I was like, nice.
Not a perfect track record.
Not a perfect track record.
Right.
Then there's the large swath, the vast majority of people in the middle who are trying to be objective.
Sure.
And then there are the Christians who are like, the church completely replaced Israel, and they have no stance before God.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think it's a theological thing because, like, you know, I still vibe with covenantal theology. I don't think it's correct. I think it's slanderous to call it replacement theology. I do think there are people who vibe with that because there's some anti-Semitism, but I also think that covenantal theology is good and valuable in and of itself. However, I think that beyond that, there are just dudes who like buy into like anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, and it's just like really, really intense.
The anti-Semitic camp is scattered about for different reasons. My favorite thing right now, though, is that I can just throw shade at covenantal theology right now, and Thomas can't do anything about it.
You're a monster. I can't believe it. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. We've got some more episodes to do, but we love you guys. Thank you so much for listening to us.
Shout out Singapore. I hope
Singapore
that the banter was less, sir.
Yeah. Feel free to write us some fan mail or some hate mail or some just medium mail. Just be like, okay, show. You know, I like Joe Thorne better. All right. Well, God bless you guys. We'll catch you on the flippity flop.
See ya.